Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a nice spring break. Today we're going to be getting into periodic data. To start off, we are going to have a couple vocab words that you can see below. First one is periodic function. So a periodic function is a function that repeats a pattern of y values at regular intervals. And we actually call these intervals cycles. So it's basically just going to be a function where you see a pattern because the y values keep getting repeated, and we call each section that gets repeated a cycle. The next word is period, and that is the horizontal distance of one cycle. So if you look at how the function is repeating itself on a graph, and if you see how far on the x-axis one of those cycles is, that is called the period. And don't worry, we're going to do pictures of all of this, so hopefully it'll make sense. But the next word is midline. And what that is, it is a horizontal line, remember horizontals from right to left, between the maximum and minimum value of a periodic function. So the highest point and the lowest point on that function. Now the next word, amplitude, is kind of similar to the midline in that it is half the distance between the maximum and the minimum. But the amplitude just needs the actual number. So what is half the distance between the maximum and minimum? Whereas midline is actually a line. It's going to be an equation. So y equals wherever that horizontal spot is between the maximum and minimum. So let me get a graph on here and show you guys more in pictures what I'm talking about. Okay, you guys, so I'm going to be doing some color coding for this. In yellow, I'm going to do the cycle. The period will be blue, midline in red, and then amplitude in green to kind of help you guys follow along. So the graph that I have right here, this is a periodic function. I hope with, the little bit that's there, you can see the pattern and, what it's going to keep doing. If you remember from the top, a cycle is basically one section of where it repeats. So to find the cycle, I always like to start out where it crosses the x-axis, so down here, and then basically just following it until it repeats again. And that's where it comes back up at the x-axis. So that would be one cycle. This function is just a repeating pattern of that. For the period, it says we need the horizontal distance of one cycle. So I'm going to look at the x-axis and find what that distance is. When I look here, I notice that it starts just before 0, but not quite to -1. And then I notice it goes, 15, 16, 17, 18, just past 18, but not all the way up to 19. So from 0 to just over 18, plus the negative bit that's over here, I'm going to say that that's probably about 19. So I'm going to say the period is about 19. Next thing we have is the midline, which is the horizontal line between the maximum and minimum value. Now this can be a bit weird to find sometimes. If you notice, the maximum value goes up to here, which is 12. The minimum goes down to -8. So if I want to find exactly what is in between 12 and -8, one thing that you can do is you can add those two together and then cut them in half. So -8 plus 12 is 4, and 4 cut in half is 2. So my midline should be right here, right at 2. Right? That's right exactly in half of both of them. So I would say my midline is y equals 2. And again, just to kind of show you how I got that, I took the maximum, which is 12. I took the minimum, which is -8. I added them together. That gives me 4. And then I cut that in half, and I got 2. So y equals 2 is the midline. Next thing we need to find is the amplitude. So what the amplitude is, it's half the distance between the minimum and maximum. Well, we know that our midline is the middle between the maximum and minimum. So what we want to do, basically, the amplitude is just going to be from the maximum to the midline, or you could also do the minimum to the midline. So that actual distance, if I am going from a 2 to a positive 12, that difference is going to be 10. Similarly, if you go from the midline to the minimum, that goes from a 2 to a negative 8, which again is a distance of 10. So that's really what all these things are and how we would find them on a graph. What I'm going to do next is put another graph up, give you guys some time to go through it and see if you can find, just what the cycle is, the period, so how long the cycle is, the midline, and then the amplitude. Okay, this is our first example. We have another periodic function down below. I'd like you to find the period, the midline, and the amplitude. If you'd like to pause your video, now would be a good time to do that, and then you can come back and check what you have. Okay, so what I do for this to find the cycle, again, I like to start at the easiest spot, so right where it's up here. It goes down and comes back up, so that is one cycle. After that, it keeps repeating that pattern. Of course, you could do it from anywhere, really. I mean, if you wanted, you could do it from down here and then back to the bottom. I just kind of like starting it at the y-axis or kind of just at easy points for me to visualize. You should end up with the same answer regardless. So that is what my cycle is. So now I need to find the period. So period is the length from the start of a cycle to the end of a cycle. If I notice here, again, we're just gonna have to kind of do a little bit of guessing with this. It starts at 0, and it looks like it goes just past 3, but not quite to 3.2, so I'm gonna say 3.15. So my period is about 3.15, right? Are we okay with that? I mean, I think that's about what it is. Next thing we are going to do is that midline. And if you remember the midline, it's half of the maximum and the minimum value, and y equals that. So I'm going to continue with my color coding. So red for the midline. My maximum value is -1, and the minimum is -5. So to find my midline, what I am going to do, I am going to add -1 and -5 and then cut it in half. So -1 plus -5 cut in half, it's -6 cut in half, which is -3. So the midline is y equals -3. And if I draw that on here, hopefully you'll see that that is cutting it right in half. So that is my midline. And the last thing is the amplitude. Remember, the amplitude is the distance from either the minimum or the maximum to that midline. So this distance right here, it goes from a -1 to a -3. That is a distance of 2. So my amplitude is 2. I'm going to put one more up for you guys to do, and I'm not going to go through the next one. I'm just going to have the answers up for you to check. So let me put that up. All right, so here's the next example for you to work through. Take your time, go through it. If you're watching this on a phone or something, hopefully you can just pause it, take a screenshot, and then use markup. That's what I've been doing a lot of. So go ahead, pause here, solve this one, do it on a separate sheet of paper if you want, and then come back for the answers in a couple seconds. Okay, if you did this one, this should be about what you have. My period, I said about 13, because if you saw it went just a little bit past 12. Midline should be y equals 1, and amplitude should be 4. All right, for this one, I wanted to get into just not as curvy of a line. Sorry, the picture's a little bit grainy, but if you guys will do, again, the same thing for this, the period, midline, and amplitude. Okay, this is what you should have for this one as well. Notice that I also added in, just in case you needed them or, just wanted to know more, a cheating kind of way to find the amplitude with a formula. You just do the max, subtract the min, and divide it by 2. It's different from the midline where you do the maximum plus the minimum divided by 2, but this is what you should have had for this problem. We're going to get into the next problems where you guys are going to be creating a function based on a given period and a given amplitude. Okay, so I'd like you guys to get a little bit creative here. Draw a periodic function where the period is 2 and the amplitude is 3. So again, a period of 2 and an amplitude of 3. As I said, keep in mind what I draw might be different than what you draw. I'm going to try to draw a few just to kind of give you guys an idea of what I'm looking for and what I'm expecting with this kind of a question. Okay, so these are the two that I came up with. It is a bit kind of tricky to think of exactly how to do it. So period is 2, so where it should be repeating itself is 2. So if I notice, it does this, and then it repeats that pattern, and it would keep going, you know, if it did. And the one down here in 2 sections on the x-axis, then it repeats itself, and again, it would keep going. And then for the amplitude, they should each from their midline go up to the maximum or minimum a height of 3. I kept the midline the x-axis just because I wanted to keep it as easy as possible. So you notice from the x-axis to the maximum on this one, that's a height of 3. From the minimum, that's also 3. And again, the bottom one to the minimum is a height of 3. And that maximum is also a height of 3. So there's a couple different ways you could do these. Yours probably looks completely different than mine. Yeah, that's that. I'm going to give you guys one more to do, and then you can do the book work. Here is the next one for you. So draw a periodic function with a period of 4 and an amplitude of 1. So amplitude should be 1, period should be 4. I'm going to give you guys time to do this. All right, so this is the one I thought of to draw for this. So I need to make sure my period is 4. So how often it repeats itself should be a length of 4, which that is, and then it continues on again with the pattern. And I need the amplitude to be 1. So that is from the middle, which is actually y equals 1 is the middle, because that is right in between the maximum and the min. And the amplitude from the midline to the maximum is 1, and from the midline to the minimum is 1. So this satisfies this problem. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's all I have to say about that. Hopefully this made sense to you guys. We are going to be using the phrases cycle, period, midline, amplitude a lot as we're now getting into our trig. So please get familiar with what these words mean, so that in the future when I just ask you for the amplitude or the period, you guys know what's going on. Today, you guys are going to be doing bookwork 7.2. Tomorrow, you'll do the classwork. Wednesday, any tutoring if you guys need help. And then Thursday, you guys are going to have your mini test. All right, hope you guys are doing well.